As Deborah mentioned, I'm Tori Cook. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing at Chorus Connection. I like to refer to myself, and I'm the only person who refers to me as this, but the chorus management extraordinaire, because I live and breathe all things chorus management. I love to make choruses better. I love to talk about streamlining operations in choruses. I love to kind of rethink how choruses operate as a whole, so that we can adapt to the changing landscape and just be better overall. And I'm also on the board of GBCC as well. So today we are going to talk about building venue partnerships amidst COVID-19. I'll probably do about 15 to 20 minutes of some presenting, and then I have some discussion topics. I'll open the floor to some questions, and we can kind of just hash this thing out together. So about a month or two ago, I manage a Facebook group called the Chorus Management Network. And we had a meeting where we had basically 4 breakout sessions to talk about planning in-person performances, virtual performances, patron and singer engagement. And one of the topics that came out of this as a lingering question was really, what are we going to do about the venues? How are we going to work with venues? What is that going to look like when we go to venues? I haven't been hearing back from venues. There were a lot of challenges that we were facing trying to coordinate planning performances with them or re-envision performances with them. So that's a lot about what I want to talk today to you about, is addressing those questions. So I'm going to talk about what we need from performing arts venues right now, the challenges that venues are facing and how we can help overcome them as performing arts organizations. I'm going to talk about specific questions you can use to start conversations with venues, a few tips for staying informed about reopenings in your area. I'm going to talk a little bit about outdoor venues, but not too much. And then I'm also going to share with you a variety of resources that you can share with your venues that have sample reopening plans for events. So without further ado, let's go. So what do we need from venues? I actually wrote a blog about this a couple weeks ago, and I am going to provide a link to that in the slides. But to basically sum up what we need from venues, in my opinion, is we need more flexible cancellation policies than anything we've ever had before. Because many of us are planning, those of us who are planning in-person performances, we are prepared for the fact that there might be event cancellations amidst COVID-19. So really taking a look at the contracts that they've had in place from the past that maybe no longer apply, and looking at those cancellation policies, including talking about the deposit situation. No one wants to plan an in-person performance, pay a bunch of money in a deposit, only to have it canceled 2 months down the line. So I think that venues should really be more open to either waiving deposits or having refundable deposits as well. So that's one thing that I think we need from venues. Another thing that we are expecting from venues is whatever their protocols are for socially distanced events. Not only for our planning purposes, but also our audiences are expecting venues and expecting our organizations to have this information mapped out, so that they can make an educated decision about whether they want to purchase a ticket and come to the event. So that has to be laid out from the venue standpoint, and it has to be laid out from the organization standpoint. Another thing I think we really need from venues is sort of the openness to re-envisioned in-person events. And what I mean by that is maybe renting the space with a venue doesn't look like what it looked like before COVID-19. Maybe renting the space from the venue is not an in-person concert with a full house. Maybe renting the venue means that we are in there just for rehearsals, or we're in there doing a virtual choir video where our conductor is being filmed in a venue so that we can put together a really cool virtual concert experience. Maybe it's a live stream event that's very different from in-person concerts where you have attendance or audiences. So I think that we need this sort of open-mindedness from venues to start thinking through what those re-envisioned in-person events might look like, and also how their pricing and business models will change based on that. I think we also need, along with flexible cancellation policies, lowered or negotiated rental fees. A couple things that I highlighted in the blog: base rental fees are typically a certain amount. And in my opinion, with socially distanced concerts and venue reopenings, what's likely going to happen is that ticket capacity is going to be down. They're going to have to limit ticket sales. So in my opinion, the base rental value has gone down. So in that case, I think that venues should be very open to re-looking at their base rental fees. And in the same way of hosting re-envisioned in-person events, that base rental fee might not make sense. If a venue charges $6,000 base rental fee for a standard concert, that probably isn't going to make sense if you're just getting your conductor in there to do a virtual choir video, or if you're getting your chorus only in there to do like a live stream. So I think that venues really need to start looking at their base rental fees. They should also be looking at their room rental fees because, as we all know, we're probably going to need more space. Maybe the dressing rooms that we have will have max capacity, or those kinds of things. So we need more space from venues, and we probably need them at a lesser rate, because we can't be paying for 4 rehearsal rooms just because we have to be socially distanced, because we all know that we can't afford that kind of thing. So we're going to need more space, but hopefully they can work with us on the fees that have previously probably been charged for getting extra space. They also should be looking at box office fees, because as they're changing their box office model, that might need to be renegotiated. So for example, we rent Jordan Hall in Boston. They have like a per seat fee for preservation fees. They also have box office fees when we use their box office, which includes a lot of the times the labor and staff of people running their box office. So as we move to a more touchless box office, I think that the staffing fees will likely go down. We might see migrating to online ticketing only and no door sales and things like that. So again, the pricing, really the structure of the box office is going to change, and the pricing should also change to reflect that. And then a couple other fees that I've seen venues tack on, things like fees just for the sake of live streaming, or sound and recording fees above labor. Like, I always think we should pay labor fees, but anything above and beyond that the venue is just getting revenue from, live stream, sound, recording, I think venues are going to have to really think about whether it makes sense to charge that, because many of us are going to be looking for those virtual outlets, because the ticket capacity is lowered, because it's socially distanced, because more people are looking for those virtual offerings. So again, another fee. One more fee, I promise. I'm talking a lot about fees. I think another fee that I've seen tack on from venues, which in my opinion makes no sense anymore, are things like stage equipment fees, like stage extensions, or other sound equipment that maybe they would have charged us for in the past, but that we're going to need for socially distanced stages. So no more stage extensions. That's what I want to tell all venues. Please stop charging us like $500 for the stage extension. Again, if it's a labor thing, I understand that, but if it's just like purely from a revenue standpoint, I think that venues should try to be a little bit more flexible. So a lot of this is in regards to kind of pricing and how it changes based on the new business models that venues are going to have to put in place, really. And the last thing we need from venues is just straight up communication. I think everyone is afraid of giving answers because they don't know what's happening, but that makes it obviously impossible for us to plan anything. So at the bare minimum, what I want from venues as a performing arts organization is for them to communicate back to me what they're thinking. I don't need all the answers, but I do want them to communicate with me and to let me know what's on their mind. So this is, again, laid out in a blog. I think that I really felt like it was an important exercise for me to kind of think through, what do I want from venues, and so that I could tell them, what do I want from you? So that's all in a blog. I'll link to it, and you can use that in your conversations with venues. But on the flip side, I also wanted to really kind of think about some of the challenges that venues are facing, so that, we're building real partnerships here, that we're always being understanding of, yeah, we're facing challenges and here's what we need from you, but what are you facing and how can we help you? So venues are really struggling as well. I'm sure that you've seen this in New York. But they're struggling to stay afloat. They aren't getting their incoming revenue in the same ways that they've had before. They're not being able to make rent in some cases. I've already seen some venues have to move because they can't make rent and they're not getting revenue. So this is very much part of the reality right now, is that they are struggling to bring in revenue. So that's one challenge they face. Another is that they're incredibly understaffed. A lot of venues have had to furlough their staff. They've had to, like us, completely restructure everything while also simultaneously not having their regular full-time staff members. So they're highly understaffed, which I think leads to the other issue of, when you're understaffed and you're asking to plan in-person performances and plan reopening and everything like that, they're very limited with time. So they are probably struggling to get through figuring out how to reopen. And they're also probably not going to want to spend a lot of time planning performances that might not come to fruition. I think very much all of us are concerned about this, but I think we're all concerned about liability and lawsuits, particularly for in-person events that carry significant health and safety risks. So what I wanted to do is, talk about the different challenges that venues have. And those are the ones: revenue, staffing, time, and liability and lawsuits. Those are the ones that came to mind. And I want to talk about how we can help venues overcome that. So the first is, well, we can give them business. Whatever business we can give them, we should and try to consider giving them our business, whatever that means. Because if we don't do that, these venues might not be around next year. So we do have to find ways to try to give them revenue. And this can be really anything. As I said before, it doesn't have to be an in-person concert with a full house. It could be that you pay them for recording space. It could be that you pay them for a live stream. You pay to do some filming there for your interviews or your content that you're creating and maybe selling online. So really kind of think outside of the box at ways that you can work with venues to provide them with business that's also bringing value back to you. I think another way we can help is to be as organized and helpful as possible to help with their furloughed staff or any understaffing. I know that we're struggling with this too, but one thing I think is just like, as my role in Chorus Connection, I help chorus managers come up with all of these like ideas and things like that. I think we should be helping venues with that as well, because they don't have as many resources as choruses do, frankly. So making sure that we're staying up on top of reopening guides for venues, which I'm going to share with you today, and really information that you can just send to venues so that they don't have to do the research on their own. So really trying to be as helpful as possible with sharing information with these venues, I think, is really important. Another thing that you can do is to just help them come up with their policies, which we're going to talk a little bit about today too. So really coming up with ideas for socially distanced concerts for them and seeing if that works for them. Some of them might not have done all of the work yet to figure this out. So anything we can do to help them stay organized would be helpful, I think. I think another thing is, as I mentioned before, they're probably worried about spending a lot of time planning events that won't come to fruition. So that might be something that's keeping them from talking to you. In the past, there was certainly an expectation, at least for my choruses, that once you make a booking, you can start working on your performances with the venue staff right away. And I think that in COVID-19, I think that we need to be a little bit more flexible with that. And we can, work with the venues to say, okay, like, we want to have a booking on your calendar for 2 years down the line or a year down the line. And we're okay if we don't start planning until 2 months out or 3 months out or 1 month out, however quickly you think you can plan. And that way they might be more willing to be flexible with the deposit and things like that. So I think that we should make it very clear to venues that we're flexible and it doesn't have to be done the same way we've done before. Because I think a lot of the reasons why they're not talking to us is because of these types of fears and challenges that they're facing. So again, communicating back to them about what we need and what we're willing to work with them and be flexible on. For the liability and lawsuits issue, I think that any ways that you can share that you're, minimizing risk and liability, if you are doing, liability waivers and stuff like that, you can share your plan to do that with them. I would say do your own work with the insurance companies up front to make sure that you've got any coverage that they're willing to cover. Again, this is kind of a case-by-case basis. You're going to have to talk to them. Put in just any sort of clauses that help minimize liability for the venues and you and everybody, really. And I think also just like, I'm going to put it frankly, but just kind of letting them know that you're not looking to sue them if things go wrong. You're looking for a collaborator who's willing to experiment with you in this crazy, crazy time, and that, is willing to just kind of say, okay, let's find a way to make this work and to do it as safely as we possibly can, but that you're not going to go turn around and like try to sue them for helping, So I think that there's like, this is obviously something that you don't do in writing, but I think just having that conversation with them is like, hey, we're really looking for venues that are willing to do this and to, become sort of the pioneers in this performing arts space. And of course, the last thing is communicate back to them. Make sure that, you're sending them resources and information, that the lines of communication are always open. I have another blog coming out tomorrow with a whole list of questions that performing arts organizations and venues should be asking each other and talking about. And I'm going to kind of sum up the types of questions we should be asking venues right now. So the first question is, we should be asking reservations and booking questions, such as when will you reopen? When will you begin bookings? What will the reopening process look like? Things like that. We should be talking about space contracts and fees. We should be asking how much space can we get? How are the fees going to change? What types of changes are we going to make in the contract this year that we've never had before? Those types of questions. Another category of questions is sanitation measures. What is the venue going to provide? What can you bring in? What types of sanitation measures are they putting in place to keep everybody safe, from the ventilation systems to the socially distanced things, et cetera, et cetera. Another category which kind of goes into sanitation in some ways is their social distancing protocols. What is their staff doing to maintain social distancing? What are they going to have their audiences do? What's the lobby going to look like? What's the house going to look like? What's the stage going to look like? All of those types of things are questions you should start to ask the venues. And of course, any box office changes. How will box office protocols shift? What's the venue capacity? How will door sales change? How will ushering change? All of those logistical types of questions that we need to figure out, really per venue, case by case basis, we should be asking the venues. So again, I'll have a blog coming out with those tomorrow. So keep a lookout for that blog as well. I'll send it to Deborah too. So those are the types of questions we should be asking venues. And then one thing before I get into sort of some outdoor considerations is, how do you stay informed of venue reopenings? Because I think part of it is like the difficulty is we need to find venues that are actually willing to reopen, because there's a lot that aren't going to do that, and that's okay. But we need to find the ones that are willing to reopen so that we can figure out who we can work with. And I had a few ideas for this that I wanted to share with you. The first is that you can set up Google Alerts to notify you of keywords that would include things like venues reopening NYC, so that anytime there's a news article across all media channels that is talking about a venue reopening, then you're alerted to that. So I made some suggestions in these slides, and I will send these slides out. You'll be able to download these later. So you can just simply, create a Google alert for each of these keyword phrases, and hopefully that's going to pull together all of the articles for you on a daily digest or whatever you set your frequency to let you know what venues in your area are reopening. Of course, you can do this super locally too. You could do arts venues reopening Brooklyn or something like that. you can get even more localized if you want, or expand it if you're considering places outside of the city. Obviously, just keeping in touch with all of your arts sections in your local media, subscribe to them all, read them all, every week, every month. As long as you're saying, like, people will be reporting on venue reopenings, so just stay in tune with the local media. Another thing that I think is kind of a creative idea is to utilize space finder sites. So this is kind of like, where you go online to find office space or something like that. But there are websites where you can search outdoor venues for events. And I do think that a lot of choruses are probably going to be doing smaller outdoor events, like with a small chamber choir or something like that. And these types of space finder sites are really great at finding those types of venues, restaurants and wineries, gardens, homes that just have massive, event space available, that sort of thing. So I listed a few here that you can use to search. They have specific filters for outdoor venues. And I guess I would equate this, if you haven't seen these types of sites, to like finding wedding venues, where you can just search venues, outdoors, 100 people, and they have these filters that make it really easy to find space. And then, of course, the last one is to, help your choral community, share what you're finding. You're lucky to have a consortium in your city that is dedicated to choruses. So use this to your advantage and share your findings with each other. Certainly with Boston's Choral Consortium, we're starting to work on building a venues database and things like that. And we're probably going to have to divide and conquer and have, certain people help find venues in one city, certain people help find venues in another city, so that we can all stay informed. And I can't stress enough, like, working together as a choral community to get through this is so important. And I know there's so many New York choruses, and you're probably considering yourselves competitors with each other, but let's just get through this together and help each other all come out on the other side. And like, book your venue first if you want, and then tell everyone, but please share that information. And then the last thing I wanted to cover here, because I'm sure you're sick of me talking, is some outdoor considerations. I don't have a full logistical guide for outdoor venues yet, although it's a great idea and I should probably write it. But I want to point to this woman, Colleen Dillenscheider, who uses data to talk about basically arts organizations, especially during COVID-19. And she's talking about people's intent to visit different arts and cultural entities. And she just updated her data from July. And this is the data of basically, what makes people feel safe returning to cultural entities. And this has completely changed actually since when she first did it back in, I think, June. But you'll notice that the ability to be outside and outdoors is number 3. Masks, by the way, are number 1, which was a huge shift from, I believe it was the vaccine was number 1 in June. And now it's face coverings will make people feel more comfortable, which is very interesting. But the ability to be outside and outdoors and to have, movement was really important for people to feel comfortable coming to concerts again. So I know we've said this a bunch, but I do think outdoor venues are probably going to be much more common this year. So finding those venues and working with those venues is going to be really important. A couple things I wanted to point out for outdoor venues. I wanted to share just the different categories of outdoor venues, a couple specific examples, and some challenges with each of them. So the first is that you have your sort of like outdoor, these are formal concert halls, formal concert venues. These are things like the Prospect Park Bandshell, the Naumburg Bandshell, those types of venues. I don't know New York as well as I do Boston, but I am sure that there are outdoor venues that you have that can operate year round, although I'm sure most of them operate in the summer. So it might be worth reaching out to some of them and trying to see if they are planning to be open for the whole year. Another outdoor venue category is government run. venues. So this is things like outdoor parks, gardens, public recreation spaces. And this one, I think in particular, comes with a lot of challenges. And I think the biggest challenges is that they're government run, which means that they're, in my opinion, probably less likely to build that relationship that you're looking for with a concert venue. They're probably not going to care, frankly, about giving you answers or planning these events. I just don't feel like that's of utmost priority for them. So these are available to you, but I can't imagine that they're going to be willing to work with you in the same way as a formal concert hall will. Restaurants, wineries, breweries, and the like. I love the idea of partnering with restaurants, wineries, and breweries this year. Obviously, they're hurting for business, and I think that they would be very interested in trying to plan some sort of event down the line here as safely as they can. But providing entertainment has always been a great draw for these types of places, and I do think that this could be a great partnership opportunity moving forward. So something to consider. I have heard a lot about door-to-door or at-home pop-up performances like caroling and such outdoors outside of people's homes. So I think that's a fabulous idea for the holidays, you know, getting a quartet together or something like that, or a very small chamber ensemble sort of doing these door-to-door things, which still seem like they could be done pretty safely, you know, if you plan it the right way. So I love that idea. Or doing at-home pop-up performances, whatever that means. I don't know if you've heard of group muse, but group muse is like a classical concerts in your home. They book classical musicians to come play in the home, and then they get paid like tips. The musicians get paid tips. So I can see this happening as long as there's, you know, outdoor space or a safe space where you can do that. I just see this being kind of like a really clever way of bringing music to people during this time. And then, of course, schools and universities with outdoor auditoriums and sports fields, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's definitely questionable about whether they'll want to rent space out. I do think if they're not open, they actually might be willing to rent more of their spaces out. If they are open, they might be running into more safety issues, but I'm not sure. I really don't know. This is all just sort of best guess. But I do think that schools and universities, they do have a lot of outdoor spaces oftentimes that can be served in a venue capacity. So that's kind of my presentation. I think the big key takeaway for me is to be a partner with your venues, keep the communication lines open, help venues overcome their challenges, and let them know what your challenges are and work together. And then my last slide here is a full list of resources that I found so far that are mostly reopening guides and other types of just resources for venues that you can share with all of your venues, because some of them might not be doing the research, they might not know about these resources. And the two best ones that I found are the Event Safety Alliance Reopening Guide and then the Reopening Guide to Theatrical Venues. And both of these have very detailed what should venues do to social distance and logistics and phased reopening plans. They're very, very detailed and they really cover a lot of ground. So those are the two best ones that I have currently found. And I'm going to let you download this as well at the end here so that you have the full list of links as well. So this is the link to download the slides. And then I would love to just kind of hear from the floor, hear some of people's questions, concerns, and challenges, and see if we can work together to come up with some solutions.